Hey there, friends at Spanish River. I wanted to take a few minutes and follow up on today's message, the call to unexpected leadership. This study of Esther and Mordecai has been a fascinating one for me, and as we go through the book of Esther, there's many things that are very easy for us to affirm. I mean, we can affirm without any doubt God is sovereign. I mean, that's clear. It's taught in the book of Esther. It's clearly taught that God wants us to understand this providential perspective, that we live our lives with a mindset that He's in control and He's working things out. The question I want to ask is, one, did Mordecai really operate with a providential perspective? And two, in chapter 4, verse 16, when Esther says, "If I perish, I perish," was that a statement of firm resolve, or was she just resigned to say, oh well, whatever happens? Now it's interesting because my views are changing a little bit the more I study this out. It's important for me to note that scholars are on both sides of these questions, but I wanted to throw this your way as you spend a little time studying and preparing for this week's study. First, it appears that Esther and Mordecai, who were both great people in their own right, were really more great patriots, I'll say, than great followers of God. In some respects, we might say today they were cultural Christians. We'd use that language, perhaps. When we see certain things, there's no mention of God, there's no mention of prayer, there is compromise that runs throughout the book on the part of Esther and Mordecai. So when I look at Esther, she is a Jew who hides her Jewishness for 5 years from the king of all people. She goes by her Persian name much more than she goes by her Jewish name. She calls a fast, and she asks people to fast, but there's no prayer along with that fast, and that would normally be the case, fasting and prayer. But for some reason, it's not there. Some scholars say that, well, that's just assumed that they prayed, and others are noting that, no, that's really an indication of the fact that they really weren't seeking God as much. They had this general perspective of God was working in a covenantal fashion, but they weren't as devotedly righteous in that sense of following God as we would expect. For Mordecai, it's recorded in the scriptures that he tears his garments, which is a sign of mourning, but at the same time, we don't see him tearing his heart, so to speak, before God, as the scriptures call us to. So in many ways, although there's no doubt God wants us to operate with that providential perspective, I'm not quite so sure that Mordecai himself was operating that way, although God is teaching us that through him. The second thing has to do with the issue of Esther. When Esther in chapter 4, verse 16 says, "If I perish, I perish," was that firm-hearted resolve, God, I'm just going to do this if this is what it takes, and in a sense, I'm surrendering to your providence? Or was it more of throwing up her hands in the air and say, well, if I perish, I perish, oh well? And I think it's a little bit more of the latter than it is the former. Although, again, scholars are on both sides of this. The only other time this expression is used over in Genesis when Jacob responds, well, if Joseph is gone, he's gone. And it's this sense of resignation. And consequently, there is a feeling that maybe that was the case with Esther as well. Anyway, something to think about, something to pray about, something to walk through as you prepare for your study this week. God's given us a great time, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Hey, check out the site, and you'll see some good resources. I'll reference one or two that I'm using in my preparations for Esther. I think you'll find those beneficial. Hey, the Lord bless you as you serve Him this week and as you seek to follow Him in those places of unexpected leadership.